Good morning, Knicks fans, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. My name is Andrew Claudio, aka GMAC, and it is time to preview another Knicks matchup. This time on Thursday night, the NCAA tournament will have started. In fact, it gets started here in about an hour and a half here in the States. And I wish that we were coming to you with more joyous vibes here in Knicks land. But the Knicks will take on the Charlotte Hornets, at least, who are hopefully going to be a team that the Knicks can get right against, although we all thought against the Spurs it would be a get-right game. Let's start here. The Charlotte Hornets are 17-51. They are clearly in the middle of their Tankapalooza. Most Hornet fans are watching the NCAA tournament with a careful eye because their next big rotation piece might showcase themselves. I know a lot of Hornet fans will probably be watching the Duke games to see if Cooper Flagg plays, to see how that might shake out. Look, I know last night was annoying. I agree with my good friend and colleague, Mr. Jonathan Macri, most annoying loss of the season in San Antonio, but we will see how this team responds against the Charlotte Hornet team. Yes, they're on the road. Yes, LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges, who didn't play in their most recent game, are probable for tonight. We'll see how the Knicks fare, even though they don't have Jalen Brunson in this matchup. And joining me to preview said matchup once again, across the pond, we go again to Mr. James Plowright. He covers the Hornets for Culture. Well, CLT being it's CLTURE. It's a Charlotte-based, North Carolina-based website, media place, however you want to put it. And he covers the Hornets for a podcast on Sports Illustrated. James, welcome back to Knicks Film School, sir.
Thank you for having me back, Andrew. Thank you.
So we're going to start here. So normally I like to go big picture to begin, but I need to reverse the vibes here in Knicks land. And I was telling you a little bit beforehand that it's just like things are being thrown at each other and every bad word is being said at the moment. So a Knicks fan that's looking at the Hornets with any fear, what would you say to them right now after watching them as intently as you have through 68 games and a 17-51 record?
I would say that, look, the numbers are on your side, okay? The Hornets have been pretty terrible since the NBA trade deadline. They obviously beat San Antonio, who just beat the Knicks just the other week and scored the second highest number of points in franchise history, set a franchise high for 3-pointers made, but then followed that up with scoring 88 points against the Clippers and getting blown out by the Hawks. So, I mean, look, lightning could strike twice, okay? I can't rule it out, but equally, the Knicks haven't lost in Charlotte since 2021. So it would be a pretty big surprise to see Charlotte pull this out. Although I will say they have got most of their available guys tonight. LaMelo, Miles Bridges, Mark Williams, all tracking to play. And they've not often had that in the recent couple of weeks. And when they've had, they've actually been, competitive. They picked up wins against the Nets, against the Miami Heat. So I think when the Hornets played the Knicks earlier in the season, they were even more shorthanded. And I think it was like a 1-point win. The Knicks pulled it out last time we spoke. I think they're going to have more talent than the last time. But equally, the season is definitely kind of gone at this point, and there is a little bit of malaise beginning to settle in.
So to your point about the post-trade deadline Charlotte Hornets, they're 5-14 since the deadline with the worst net rating in the NBA, minus 14.5. And anybody that heard the other day, the pod we did with the Miami Heat about the Miami Heat, here's a stat for you, James. So the Heat in first halves since the trade deadline have a plus 4.2 net rating, which is like the Knicks have a plus 4.2 net rating. So the Heat in the first halves of games are equivalent to like the 7th or 8th best team in the NBA. It's a minus 18 net rating in second halves, which would, the worst net rating ever was either, you might know this well, the Charlotte Bobcats in 2011, the team that went 7-59,
7-59, lockout shortened season. Yeah. Corey Maggette just didn't have it that year. Right. And that's what you get.
Yes. Well, that's what the Miami Heat are in the second halves of games. The other, it's a tie for the worst net rating ever with the Mavericks in 93. So you point to the 5 wins that they had, and the one that stands out is the Spurs game, because the Spurs, which we saw last night, have the worst defense in March, but the best offense. So it's both extremes. If you could score on them, you could probably outscore them. But on a night where you don't have it, they'll beat you at pace. So on behalf of Knicks fans, when it's looked the best for the Hornets, is it just LaMelo going off? I'm staring at his on-offs this year. It requires a little bit of context. I know to clean the glass, he's +9, but it's weird that the trio of him, Brandon Miller, and Miles Bridges don't have like an insane lineup that they're all a part of. It's just kind of like on the aggregate, they're all pluses, but when you take some teammates away, they're all gigantic negatives. And that's how you get that plus minus. So like when it's looked the best and how it could look tonight, how has it looked, and could it look that way against the Knicks?
So yeah, early in the season is when the LaMelo Ball was playing his best and the Hornets were most competitive. And at that point, they were much healthier at the time. They had Grant Williams, who was like arguably was outplaying Miles Bridges early in the season, who was a really good dribble handoff partner for LaMelo Ball. They had Trey Mann as like a secondary scorer. They had Brandon Miller. And now you just see teams being able to throw everything at LaMelo, right? You know, Daquan Jeffries is now starting. I mean, did you ever think when Daquan Jeffries got traded to the Hornets, he would come back to play against New York as a starter? Like,
once a Nick, always a Nick. Daquan Jeffries, baby. Yeah.
And that's the situation they're now in. And teams have just made it super difficult on the LaMelo Ball, being really, really physical with him, picking him up full court. And he's got frustrated and he doesn't have the weapons around him consistently enough to be able to overcome that. And now Miles Bridges has actually been on an absolute heater the last like 15 or 20 games. He's actually been probably the Hornets' best player since the trade deadline, outplaying LaMelo Ball. The problem is Bridges' numbers have come in a lot of losses, so it doesn't always feel like it's conducive to winning, but it's been like his rebounding, creation, scoring. If you're not ready to play, like Miles Bridges will take advantage of you. He will feast inside. He will hunt mismatches, and that's absolutely what he's excellent at, and that's what the team look to do a lot now, is get Miles Bridges mismatched onto like a guard or a smaller wing, and they will just let him go to work from the perimeter and punish. Now, maybe less of an issue with Jalen Brunson out, because that would probably be one of the number one targets, but he will look to probably do a similar thing tonight, but I think the Knicks are better lined up to deal with that than some of these other teams.
Especially defensively without Jalen Brunson, because they can these Deuce McBride lineups, they leave something to be desired at times on offense, but on defense they've actually been able to. Fred Katz made this point on our pod the other day, but we've also highlighted in a lot of our film work that like Deuce McBride is taking over the point of attack. And then you get Mikal Bridges in help and guarding the second best player, or Anunoby in help and guarding the second best player, which means you have a roaming one or the other of the wings, which allows Josh Hart to guard a little bit easier because he's not guarding the third best player anymore. So yeah, I think defensively the attacking LaMelo full court is like a job for Deuce McBride. And I wonder if Tibbs deploys that tonight. It's really the offensive side of the ball. Can the Knicks score enough offense? Will the Hornets be a team that forces them to have to outscore them like the Spurs did last night? That 145 against San Antonio is very much glaring to a lot of Knicks fans this morning. However, to your point, 88 points the very next game against the Clippers. So you're hoping the Knicks defense wins out here.
And the Hornets also had a stretch where they had 6 games where they didn't score over 101 points. And, so like that was in the last month. So the Hornets offense has actually been their biggest struggle. Their defense has actually been surprisingly good. I think a lot of people thought the offense would be better than the defense this year with the likes of Miller, Ball, Bridges, Mark Williams. But Charles Lee has found something with the defense. They have like high effort. They play with physicality. They win the rebounding game most of the nights. Josh Green is not an offensive player, but he does play a role defensively. So they can make things a little bit stickier for teams than you think. I mean, most of their wins, that San Antonio game really the outlier, but their other 2 wins against Brooklyn and Miami, they held them both to 102 points, which in the modern NBA, that's a really good win. When they beat the Lakers, they held them to 97 points. So they can have games where they are connected and communicating well defensively. And I think that's their most likely path tonight. Isn't a big outscoring game, because I mean that San Antonio's game, like those happen 2 or 3 times a year, right? Where like everyone, Josh Green hit like 6 threes, and so did Nick Smith Jr. Like that's not going to happen again this season or maybe this decade. But defensively, I do think there is more reliability there.
So I'm now hoping that we do get one of these low scoring games, but I guess I would hope the Knicks having more talent down the stretch would be able to win one of those games. I don't know. I'm trying not to be the paranoid Knicks fan here. I do think they should and will win this game. And I mean, as we pivot to big picture for the Hornets, I think the Hornets, you just mentioned, are starting Daquan Jeffries. So they probably also want to lose this game and get as many lottery balls as possible. Currently sitting at 3rd in the tanking standings, which, I mean, in reality is the 28th worst record in the NBA. I mean, I talked to you about this last time. The fact that it's just been like forever since the Hornets have played like a couple of play-in games, be damned, like playoff games, you know, and like how wearing is it both on a writer and a creator like you, but also like the fan base, like is now. I will say the Pistons turnaround could provide some optimism, but where's the fan base at the moment as far as the vibes and the process of the rebuild?
Yeah, and the Rockets before that, right? Remember when they were a joke with Steven Silas and they turned it around quickly? I think part of the hope for amongst some of the fan base was this would happen this year with new ownership, new head coach, and Charles Lee. The truth is the new owners of the Charlotte Hornets have done the opposite of what most of the new owners have done, right? They've not done what the Mavericks or Suns owner have done in terms of like, oh, I'm a new owner, I want to win games. They've completely gone the other way, and they've taken a super patient approach. They've collected assets. They've used all their flexibility to take on bad contracts and salary for draft picks. So this is unfortunately part of the plan. And like for them, it's probably okay. But for like you say, people who cover the team, fans, like this is now the 3rd consecutive year of being like just a basement dweller of the NBA and having very little to feel positive about. And remember those playing games at the time, you know, the Hornets were league pass MVPs. Everyone in the national media is saying they're so great to watch, young, fun team, LaMelo creation. And that is now just like slowly spiraled for a couple of years, mainly due to injuries, it felt, but their issues were much deeper than that. And it's been extremely difficult. I mean, the level of interest in the team is just completely, people are checking out, right? And they're kind of waiting until this embarrassment of the team for a lot of people is like over. They want to come back. They'll tune back in probably when they get better. But there are still, like, if you tune in some of these home games, like the Charlotte Hornets will be like 2 points down against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And, you know, they're playing for nothing. And these home games are rocking. Like the crowd are really good. They've had 12 sellouts this year. They're like middle of the league for attendance. And really, they got no right to be. So I still think, yes, there is an element, especially online, of the fan base feeling kind of worn down, which is understandable. But I think they're still doing okay because, you know, North Carolina is a basketball state.
It is indeed. Shout out to it's the triangle, right? It's the UNC, the NC State, the Wake Forest, and then Duke kind of just exists to piss off the other 3. These are my Southern bona fides. Shout out to my 6 years living down south for college. I look at LaMelo splits pre and post All-Star break, and like before the All-Star. So the simple question I'm going to ask is like, was he upset he didn't make the All-Star team, and that is potentially affecting his play? And to those that are unaware, pre and post All-Star break, he was averaging 27, 5, and 7 before the All-Star break. So 27 points a game. He's still averaging 5 and 7 since the All-Star break as far as rebounds and assists, but it's down to 19 points per game since the All-Star break. A 49 true shooting after the break, a 35% from the field since the break. I mean, we talked a little bit just now about how teams are covering him differently, but have you, just from a vibes and just like he's the best player on the team, like what's the concern about the drop off since the break for him?
Yeah, there's real concern. I think the hope was you get a LaMelo Ball who's motivated by that All-Star snub, right? I was hoping that he's going to go out and prove to everybody I'm not empty stats. This is what you're missing. And it's kind of been the opposite of that. Now, in that time, he has missed quite a lot of games with injuries. Played like one game, he dropped out another game. And it's hard to know whether that is generally that he's like struggling to play through these games. He's had missed some games with ankle soreness. He sprained an ankle at one point again. He's also missed games with wrist soreness, which is the wrist that he broke, I believe, during his rookie year. So like, are these things really bothering him? And like, he's just trying to gut through and play through the season? Or is it that he's just being rested because the team is tanking and the struggles are real and nothing to do with his health struggles? It's difficult to know that. And LaMelo doesn't give much away with the media. Was he annoyed with his All-Star being snubbed? He wouldn't tell you. Genuinely, he'd just be like, it's all basketball. I don't know. Like, that's basically what you're going to get. The other thing I think is worth mentioning, and Dirty Dancer mentioned it here in the chat, was I talked about this on my podcast the other day. I don't think enough people have talked about how like LeVar Ball, LaMelo's dad, was seriously ill in hospital. And at one point, there was like concern whether he would make it through until eventually I think he got like 2 toes amputated, then had to get part of his foot amputated and then up to his knee because of an infection in his foot and complications from his diabetes. And I think it's also perfectly reasonable, and no one said anything, and this is completely speculation, but maybe LaMelo struggled with that, right? His dad is going through serious medical treatment, and it's understandable that that could have an effect on you. On top of all the injuries, on top of, not being surrounded with the best teammates, on top of the season kind of being lost and frittering away. And the one criticism I will have of LaMelo, despite all of that, is he is someone who kind of like goes with the wind, right? If they're winning and things are good, he's into it, he's into the game, he's talking. If things aren't going well, if he's turning the ball over, if the team are down, he's not like galvanizing and pulling people out of the huddle and saying like, no, we're going to get back into this. He just kind of like feels like accepts the reality of the situation at times and kind of starts to play a little bit looser, laissez-faire, being like, well, if I'm going to lose, I might as well have fun. And in the NBA, the very best players just aren't wired that way. And I think that's something, I don't know if it'll ever click, if I'm being honest. And that's why I don't see his vision being a number one on a team. I think he is like a good number 2, another alpha, another leader, another guy to play through. And then I think LaMelo will accentuate all those other things where like his flaws aren't put out under a microscope for everybody to see.
Well, so does that translate into, if he's not the number 1, then do you need to get another big man to combat what he is, or to really be more of a partner to what he is? I would be remiss if I didn't mention the name Cooper Flag. Like, how have you thought about how they could potentially fit together? Like, what's the archetype of the person you need to pair with LaMelo Ball if he's going to be part of the solution here?
Have I thought about it? I've had happy dreams every night thinking about it, Andrew. Yeah, look, Cooper Flag is everything, would be the perfect complement for LaMelo Ball in terms of the competitive nature, the two-way play, the leadership. And like, also I think like Cooper isn't a guy that you necessarily just say like, hey, put the ball in his hands and go create. He can do that, but I actually think his fit with LaMelo Ball would be really good. And if they did draft Cooper Flag, I actually think LaMelo staying in Charlotte this summer is more likely. If they don't get him, then I think it complicates things a little bit. And I really do think the runaway of this team now is so long. Like, they are not going to be in the playoffs next year, or maybe even the year after that. And if that's going to be the case, like, maybe you just cash in on LaMelo Ball right now, because
wow,
he's got 4 years left in his contract. You'd probably get a good haul for that reason, because it's a relatively cheap max off his rookie contract in the modern NBA CBA. And I'm beginning to like think if they land 2 or 3 in the draft, don't get 1, I think I'm leaning more likely they might look to move on from LaMelo Ball this offseason. And it's not all to do with LaMelo. Part of it is to do like the runway with this team, and does it make sense for LaMelo to be here for his prime years when they're going to be in the lottery for the next 2 seasons? So I'm really coming around to that line of thinking.
Trying to think what value you get for LaMelo in that sense. And look, like, I got to acknowledge what you said about like his personal stuff. I think that's an important thing to remember with the human side of these athletes. And like, I went through it with Julius Randle, where that first season he was in New York, his grandma, who meant a lot to him, died. And for us, it was just like the year they fired Fizdale, the year that they didn't get Katie and Kyrie, the year we were stuck with Julius Randle and Taj Gibson, and the year that Leon Rose took over and all these other things. For him, it was the year that his grandma died, and that was it. Like that's the entire process of the season.
Yep.
And for Hornets fans, they might look at LaMelo as like, oh, this is the year they went and lost another 60-game season, the year that this didn't happen, and it's an encore thing. For LaMelo, it's like the year my dad lost his foot. Like that's probably how he's processing this season, not just like this year of the team, but like this season of his life. So it's important to point that out. From the transactional perspective, though, I guess it would be similar to what the Pelicans did when they got Zion. When they had the number 1 pick, they were like, all right, let's cash in on an AD trade. Obviously, the Lakers won a championship, so they can justify making it. But the haul that they got back, look, if Zion has like 1% or maybe, I guess, 5% more health luck in his life, which, I mean, it can be a better conversation about how much luck is involved. But if he's a little bit more healthy, like this is a team that at times looked like they could be a 50-win team all the time. They've cashed in on a lot of their draft picks with Herb Jones and Trey Murphy and Alvarado and a lot of these guys that have looked good. So maybe that's a similar path for the Hornets if they decide to do that, if they get some lottery luck this year. You talk about them accruing assets. They almost did that as being a team that was part of the Lakers transactions over a week. And then the Mark Williams. So talk to me. Your reaction when they made what was objectively a great trade for the Hornets, trading Mark Williams for an unprotected first and Dalton Connect.
And a first round pick swap. And a pick swap.
So they got 3. So they got a swap as well. So they got a swap.
Yes.
So just your reaction when you like, oh, the trade's off. And it's like, oh, so that really good trade we made just didn't happen all of a sudden.
So it was really weird, right? Because nothing had come out officially. But Cam Reddish was also part of that trade. And Charles Lee had said, Cam Reddish isn't in town right now. He's dealing with some personal issues. So everyone was like, oh, well, that makes sense why it's not gone through. Because Cam Reddish, I don't know, personal issues. They need him to come do his medical maybe before it gets approved. Then, I wake up in the middle of the night, 4:30 a.m. I check my phone and I go, oh my God, I'm not going back to sleep. Look, it's pretty shocking because this is not the first time this has happened. Remember, Kenny Atkinson accepted the head coaching job with the Charlotte Hornets and then like a week later pulled out and they ended up having to appoint Steve Clifford. So Hornets fans are feeling pretty weary at this point and feeling pretty cursed that just like this stuff seems to keep happening to them. And it doesn't help in this situation. It was the jewel of the league and the LA Lakers, again, the backwater of the NBA, the Charlotte Hornets. It doesn't take a lot to build that narrative of, that it's a conspiracy against Charlotte. And, I can see a question in the chat again here about like, do we think the Lakers' injury issues were real or do we think they had buyer's regret? Look, I think it's probably both, right? I think they probably saw something or maybe some of their medical process that was maybe a little worse than what they thought. Equally, it definitely wasn't enough for the trade to be voided. It's pretty clear at that point, right? Like, Anthony Davis got traded as part of the Luka trade with this abdominal issue, which he injured in his first game. Like, you're telling me that guy passed the medical and Mark Williams has been playing since. So I think they did get buyer's regret. I think, there was a very visceral media reaction to this is not a good move for the LA Lakers. And I wonder if that noise got through to them. I wonder if, because it happened so quickly, if Rob Pelinka kind of acted alone and then like his scouts and other people start saying, Rob, wait. You need to actually watch Mark Williams' defensive film though. Like, and at that point, I think they had buyer's regret. And look, when Adam Silver admits during a press conference that perhaps they need to look at some form of independent medical evaluation, that's an admission that something happened a little bit shady there on the LA Lakers side. And the Hornets are now stuck in this terrible situation where Mark Williams' trade value is tanked. Their relationship with him has to be on rocky ground. And like, what is the future now? It's just difficult for Mark Williams. It's difficult for the Hornets. And it's really for no reason. They've not done anything wrong to find themselves in this position. it's down to the LA Lakers. So, yeah, safe to say we will not be cheering for the LA Lakers this offseason.
Yeah, I can imagine the buyer's regret from Pelinka. I like the way you phrased it, that he was feeling himself after pulling a fast one on the Luka trade, decided to make another one, and then all the scouts got involved where it wasn't obvious. Like, oh yes, you should absolutely trade for Luka. Now you actually have to do some scouting or some research, and I guess the theory that if you want to flunk someone in their physical, you could just like find something, and they potentially did. Yeah, it was obviously, from an objective observer, it was just fascinating to see what we all probably thought happened actually happened, that they decided to find a way to pull out if they could. So look, I am intrigued that if there is a Pistons path for the Hornets in the future, that's for sure. And look, whether it includes LaMelo or not, I guess will be determined by what happens in the draft this year. Well, specifically lottery night. Although you're painting a picture that like Hornets fans aren't going to believe they won the lottery if they won it. They'll wait like a week to just make sure that the league isn't going to pull out and be like, actually, that lottery was wrong. We actually need to give the Lakers the first pick in the draft. So I guess we'll see. What I now need from you before we wrap up, we've done this the last couple games, and it's worked. And we've been able to predict what's going to happen based off of our pregame pod. So Monday, we predicted the pattern of the game in that we thought that the Knicks would go down early, the Heat would then put in Terry Rozier, and then the splits that I talked about would lead to a Knicks comeback and potentially even a blowout win, which they did. Then I asked my guest yesterday about basically how the Spurs could beat the Knicks and like who's the random player that's going to go off and have a big game. Knicks fans are going to try it again because I haven't been able to pronounce it correctly in 24 hours. Sandro Mamukelashvili. I think I got that as best as I possibly could.
The nation of Georgia is proud. Yeah.
Yes. The shout out to the nation of Georgia. 34 points, 7 of 7 from 3, 13 of 14 from the field, and a plus 22 and a 15-point win against the Knicks. So I now ask you, who's the random Hornet that I'm going to be staring at in the fourth quarter, and he's got 30 points? Is it Daquan Jeffries in a revenge game? Who's the Hornet that you think could potentially ruin the Knicks night in Charlotte?
I actually agree with you. I think it is Daquan Jeffries.
There you go.
He's played well the last couple of games, and he set a new season high just recently. Like, he's shooting a good ball at the moment. He's playing with confidence. So I would put my tip of the hat to Daquan Jeffries, and I think they might play him more tonight because the Knicks will play a little bit bigger with Bridges and Hart, and they might need his size versus like some of the smaller guards like Nick Smith Jr. or Damian Barr. If I was going to say if anyone knows who he is, but he did play for the Knicks G League team, right? And he was with the Knicks at some point, so some might. So yeah, I'm going Daquan Jeffries, revenge game. He'll be up for it. He's been playing well, and if you could write a script of how could this get worse for the Knicks, a Daquan Jeffries revenge game would be a pretty sweet ending.
Yeah, got that right. So there's layers to this. There's levels to this. So losing yesterday is annoying. You lose to Charlotte, then it's like, wow, you lost back-to-back games against two teams in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. This Saturday, we'll be watching. I'll give the plug now. We'll be doing our weekly watch party in New York City, where we'll be going to T Squared Social in Midtown and watching March Madness, as well as the Knicks game against the Washington Wizards. The Washington Wizards, the worst team in the NBA. We're on a bit of
beating the Hornets 4 times, by the way. I just want to say the Wizards.
Really? So of their 12 or 13 wins, they've beaten the Hornets 4 times.
And I think they maybe beat them 3 out of 4 times last year. So the Hornets are, I think, 1-7 or maybe 0-8 against the Wizards over the last 2 years. Incredible, right?
They just have their number, apparently. Yeah. Got it. What has our number at Knicks Film School is we haven't seen a win at one of our watch parties since November. So we're looking to break a streak. Excuse me. Yeah, November. I'm trying to remember. It was the Milwaukee game. No, it's the Pelicans game. That's right. We did a Christmas themed one where you had to wear an ugly jersey in December. Regardless, haven't had one in 2025 yet, and we do a lot of watch parties, and it's a bit of a Knicks Film School curse. And so we looked at the schedule, said, it's March Madness. We'll cross promote, come watch the tournament with us, but also the Knicks and Wizards play at 8:00. This way we could knock this off the shelf. This streak goes away. What we didn't anticipate was that this week could potentially be like the week from hell with them losing these games against bad teams potentially, as well as Jalen Brunson going down. So I kind of need the Knicks to return to their winning ways today, so the pressure doesn't go all on them this Saturday when they play the Wizards.
Well, if it fills you with any confidence, Hornets fans are scared of Miles McBride because whenever Miles McBride plays against Charlotte, it's like he's never missed a shot.
Yeah.
Like all teams have this, right? There's random guys for the teams who are always like incredible against them. Like everyone has these like folk heroes. It's like, why against he's 0 for 8 and then against us he always plays well. Miles McBride is that guy for the Knicks against Charlotte. So the fact that he's probably going to be starting, I believe, with Brunson out, then I think some Hornets fans would be like, maybe rather play Brunson.
So the interesting thing is that Hornets game that the Knicks played on Black Friday earlier this year, that was a pivotal moment for the season because Deuce McBride closed that game, and Mikal Bridges, who they traded 5 picks for, sat down the stretch. And it was the first time Tibbs has closed with anybody, like non-fouled, someone fouled out department. But like he didn't close with the same starting 5 of Anunoby, Bridges, Josh Hart, Mitchell Robinson, Karl Anthony Towns, not Mitchell Robinson, and Jalen Brunson. And it's only happened twice this year that he's like had all 5 available and not closed. And both times have been for Deuce. And the outcry from Knicks fans is that Josh Hart has several games where you could also do that and potentially play Deuce down the stretch. And you could actually play 5 out for the first time this year. But we'll see what happens tonight because Deuce will absolutely play. Deuce will absolutely close. And hopefully not in a competitive game, James. I'm very much telling you the vibes are on edge.
Hornets fans don't want to win this either, right? They've got
so we're both rooting for the same team tonight.
They've got a crucial tanking match coming up against the Jazz later this week. Like, that's what they've got their eyes on. And that's why, by the way, I think Ball and Bridges and Williams are all playing against the Knicks is because they've got to rest them against Utah. So
there you go.
They have to get the game in now, right? Of where like they can play and do okay. And then we'll, start Damian Barr and Nick Smith Jr. against Utah.
Well, I'm obviously hoping we all get what we want in a Knicks win tonight. And I have nothing against the Hornets. I told you this last time. Like the trip to Charlotte when I was in college was always the fun one where like the Knicks were coming to town and I wasn't able to see Knicks games. So I'd drive from Virginia to Charlotte to watch the Knicks play. And it was like my day in a city that wasn't DC,
What era was that?
This is the Bobcats. I know. So the last year that I lived in Virginia was the first year that the Hornets were back.
Okay.
So it's 2015, I believe.
The Lance Stevenson year. Okay. Yeah.
Indeed. The Lance Stevenson year. Yeah.
Lance Stevenson experience. I
don't know if you remember this, but like Carmelo Anthony like never played in Charlotte. The 4 times they made the trip to Charlotte, he played in 1 game and he played 1 minute, got hurt in the first quarter. Knicks ended up winning the game, but I never got to watch Melo play in Charlotte. He's one of my favorite players ever. Wow. But he missed the second time that I went because the Knicks had just clinched the 2 seed in 2013. And so I watched Rasheed Wallace minutes that game. Man, I was like, why did I just make a trip to Charlotte for this? And then the last one, the Knicks were on pace for a 17-win season that led to Kristaps Porzingis. Needless to say, Carmelo Anthony did not play in that one either. But it does show you, if you draft the right guy, how quickly things can turn around. Although it didn't really turn around quickly for the Knicks, but you get where I'm getting at.
Well, on Carmelo, there is one of the most probably infamous displays in Hornets history is when Carmelo dropped 52, 54.
62 on the Bobcats.
Sorry. Yeah, there you go. And I remember after the game, Steve Clifford said, and like Michael Kidd-Gilchrist was like in pieces at the end of the game because Steve Clifford left Michael Kidd-Gilchrist like 1-on-1 on an island against Carmelo all night. And after the game, Steve Clifford was like, nobody blame this on Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. This is all my fault. I let him guard him straight up all night. I didn't think he'd keep making the shots, and he did all night. So this is my fault, not MKG's. And that really scarred MKG for a long time. And every Hornets fan or Bobcats fan, I remember watching that game going, this is like nothing we've ever seen.
So it's a good place to wrap, because I think you just reminded me like of proof of concept of the pregame pod. What we remember from that game is Melo setting the all-time Knicks scoring record, getting 62 points against the Bobcats, 62 points, no assists in the game. Why would he pass? Yep. He wasn't missing anything. And little did we know that the other perspective is that Michael Kidd-Gilchrist got baptized by Carmelo Anthony in the worst possible way for to the tune of 62 points, and how the Charlotte perspective of it is. So it's good to wrap up there. And I co-sign. I hope we all get what we want tonight in this matchup, which would be a Knicks win, a get-right game, and progress for the Hornets, as Hornets fans turn their attention to the NCAA this weekend. Hopefully the Knicks don't surprise them by giving them a win instead. James, it's always good to talk to you. I do hope, like in the spirit of the Pistons, that we're eventually talking about a Hornets team that's playing more meaningful games at this point in the season. But before you get out of here, please let the fine folks know where they can find you and your Hornets coverage at any point of the Hornets season or their rebuild.
Yeah, if anyone's wanting to just keep up with the odd tweet or post about what's going on in Charlotte, you can find me on X and on Blue Sky at British_Buzz, covering the Charlotte Hornets for Charlotte Culture. If you search that, you'll be able to find it. And the Hornets on SI podcast as well. We have weekly episodes. So that's where you can find my work. And Andrew, thank you for having me on. Best of luck for the rest of the Knicks season. I know it's bleak right now, but look, you could always be the Hornets. So just remember that.
You could always be the Hornets. That should be the title of this episode. Thank you, James, as always. And thank you to everybody for tuning in to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. If you dug it, please head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. I'll be back in the future. I can't say if I'll be back on Saturday yet. We don't know if we're doing a pregame pod yet for the Wizards game. I've got a lot to take care of before a watch party. So I'm trying to find a guest. It would be pre-recorded, so it wouldn't be live. But join me for the next one. I'll definitely have one for the Dallas game that's already lined up. And I have a lot of questions about what's happened in Dallas this year for sure. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I will speak with you soon. Peace.